Section 3. Gender and Biodiversity, International Frameworks and Actions. Learn more about how gender considerations have been integrated in international commitments, national policies, projects, and local initiatives to conserve biodiversity. Key message: mainstreaming gender into biodiversity research, management, policies, strategies, and actions is key to ensuring healthy societies and a sustainable relationship between people and the environment. Gender mainstreaming. International. The Convention on Biological Diversity, 2015 to 2020 Gender Plan of Action. The Convention on Biological Diversity is a key international instrument that highlights the importance of biodiversity and the importance of implementing conservation practices while keeping socio-economic development in mind. Decisions adopted under the Convention recognize gender as an important lens to understand and take action to address the complexities of biodiversity conservation, sustainable use of the components of biodiversity, and the fair and equitable sharing of genetic resources. 2015 to 2020 Gender Plan of Action. The plan pursues 4 strategic objectives: to mainstream a gender perspective into the implementation of the Convention, to promote gender equality in achieving the objectives of the Convention and related frameworks, to demonstrate the benefits of gender mainstreaming in measures towards the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from genetic resources, and to increase the effectiveness of the work under the Convention. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, entered into force in 1981. It brings women into the focus of human rights concerns, focusing on the meaning of equality and how it can be achieved. It establishes an international Bill of Rights for women, as well as an agenda for countries to guarantee the enjoyment of such rights. A guide to the Convention Gender Plan of Action, 2015 to 2020 Gender Plan of Action Pocket Guide, Summary and Examples. For information on decisions and recommendations on gender under the Convention, please see the publication Gender and Biodiversity Technical Guide. How are gender, Indigenous peoples and local communities' perspectives addressed in the Convention? Full participation, recognizing the vital role that women play in the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and affirming the need for the full participation of women at all levels of policy making and implementation for biological diversity conservation. Knowledge, innovation and practices. Subject to its national legislation, respect, preserve and maintain knowledge, innovations and practices of Indigenous and local communities embodying traditional lifestyles relevant for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and promote their wider application with the approval and involvement of the holders of such knowledge, innovations and practices, and encourage the equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of such knowledge, innovations and practices. CBD, the Nagoya Protocol. The Nagoya Protocol aims at sharing the benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources in a fair and equitable way, including by appropriate access to genetic resources and transfer of relevant technologies. It makes specific reference to the vital role of women in access and benefit sharing, with a particular emphasis on Indigenous women. Click on the articles to find out more. Article 22.5J and Article 12.3. Article 22.5J emphasizes the need to enhance Indigenous and local communities' capacity, particularly women within those communities, in relation to access to genetic resources and traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources. Article 12.3 requests parties to support, as appropriate, the development by indigenous and local communities, including women within these communities, of a. community protocols in relation to access to traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of the utilization of such knowledge. B. Minimum requirements for mutually agreed terms to secure the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources. And C. Model contractual clauses for benefit sharing arising from the utilization of traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources. CBD Cartagena Protocol. The Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety aims to ensure the safe transfer, handling, and use of living modified organisms, LMOs, resulting from modern biotechnology that may have adverse effects on biological diversity, also taking into account risks to human health. Public awareness of biosafety, public participation in decision-making, and socio-economic considerations arising from the impact of LMOs on biodiversity are key areas of the protocol, where gender considerations are important. Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020. Aichi Biodiversity Targets and Gender. Within the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, gender equality and women's empowerment are both a stand-alone goal and a critical cross-cutting component of the goals. Biodiversity also has a cross-sectoral relevance and features prominently across many of the SDGs and associated targets. Let's click on the goals to explore more. Sustainable Development Goals. 1. No poverty. End poverty in all its forms, everywhere. 2. Zero hunger. End hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. 5. Achieve gender equality. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. 14. Life below water. Conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. 15. Life on land. Protect, restore and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, NBSAPs. National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, NBSAPs. The Convention requires parties to prepare National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, NBSAPs, or equivalent instrument, as the principal instrument to implement sustainable resource management at the national level and to integrate it into the planning and activities of all sectors that can have impact on biodiversity. Why is it important to mainstream gender into NBSAPs? To ensure that the diverse knowledge, needs, and priorities of women and men are applied to reverse the loss and unsustainable use of biodiversity in actions at national and local levels. 46% of NBSAPs submitted following the adoption of the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020 included some references to gender or women's issues, with 34% identifying gender perspectives as part of national targets or actions. 2015 to 2030 NBSAPs. To find out more on how to integrate gender into NBSAPs, please access the following: Integrating gender considerations in national biodiversity strategies and action plans, Ecuador's national biodiversity strategy, Gender and Biodiversity Joint Gains, Myth or Reality. All three of those will be available on the unccelearn.org site. Good practices at national level. Click on the pins to access case studies of gender-responsive NBSAPs. In 2016, the IUCN Global Gender Office, GGO, and the Secretariat of the CBD, with support from the Government of Japan, implemented a pilot project to build the capacity of developing countries to integrate gender into their NBSAPs. This process took place as part of the revision of such plans to align them to the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020. The project conducted 3 country initiatives in Mexico, Uganda, and Brazil. NBSAP, Mexico. Gender-responsive strategies to empower Mexican women as stakeholders for biodiversity conservation. Mexico's NBSAP 2016 includes women's and gender considerations within its main strategic goals. 5 of the 6 strategic goals advance women's participation in projects, take women's traditional resource knowledge into consideration, or promote a gender perspective in biodiversity, conservation, and education. Gender-related activities and perspectives are addressed across the NBSAP, including in indicators and the monitoring and evaluation system. NBSAP Brazil. The role of women in biodiversity, conservation, preservation, and restoration. Brazil's NBSAP 2018 pays particular attention to supporting women's participation in decision-making processes, as well as women's inclusion in payment for ecosystem services. The NBSAP further highlights gender mainstreaming as a key criterion for monitoring implementation, accompanied by the collection of sex disaggregated data to better understand gender gaps and guide more gender-responsive actions. Brazil's national multi-stakeholder platform, which monitors and supports implementation of the country's biodiversity targets, established a gender thematic group. NBSAP Uganda. Over 30 new activities with gender-responsive indicators and budgets. Uganda's NBSAP Objectives 2016 aim to enhance engagement of local communities in gender-responsive biodiversity conservation, address gender equality in the fisheries sector, and promote an environmental policy framework supporting women's access to and control over resources in the water and sanitation sector. The NBSAP also includes a series of activities with respective indicators and budgets that are gender responsive, including undertaking gender analyses and developing a gender responsive monitoring and evaluation strategy, training for women, and support to women's businesses. Local project. Good practices at the local project level. We'll click on the pins to access case studies of gender responsive projects and initiatives. To find out more, please access GEF's Guidance to Advance Gender Equality in Projects and Programs. These are all available as downloads on this platform. Protected areas. Guyana. Community action on mangrove restoration to overcome extreme weather vulnerabilities. Case study. Issue. In Guyana, a country where coastal areas can reach 1.04 meters below sea level, 90% of the population lives along the coasts. These low-lying communities are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise, as well as extreme weather conditions. The current infrastructure is not sufficient to protect the population from weather-related threats, and women are disproportionately affected by the impacts of flooding and coastal erosion. Action. The project addressed the threats to coastal communities by involving community members in the cultivation of mangroves. The purpose was to create a buffer against storm events, to reduce the force of the waves and decrease erosion. Women were targeted as project beneficiaries. Their leadership was prioritized, and they were provided with economic resources as well as training for mangrove seedling cultivation. Impact. Women accounted for 80% of participating community members. Women successfully organized village mangrove action committees and were empowered in roles as environmental leaders. Over 460,000 mangrove seedlings were planted, restoring over 10 kilometers of coastal mangrove forests, and the resilience and security of coastal communities was increased. Fisheries. Gambia. Gambian women, from poverty to resilience through oyster collection. Issue. Oyster collection in the Gambia is mostly carried out by female harvesters. This is their sole source of income and a seasonal endeavour from March to June. It is a physically tedious and risky occupation, as women do not know how to swim, and the harvesting takes place by the roots of mangrove forests close to water. They use rudimentary tools such as machetes and frequently over-harvest, which damages the mangroves. Action. In order to tackle this issue, the TRY Women's Association, supported by the GEF Small Grants Programme at UNDP, works with around 500 female harvesters under an organized structure that includes 15 villages in the Greater Banjul area. By grouping in cooperatives, members gain training and exchange knowledge on sustainable practices. They can also sell their products under a shared brand with a specific set of standards. Impact. This collaboration has produced multiple environmental, social, and economic outcomes. The state of the mangrove forests has improved due to calculated harvesting and training, sustaining the health of the ecosystem. The extended length of the closed season has allowed oysters to increase in size, leading to a 30% higher market price. Also, the communities have diversified their income through training and education on various subjects such as English and financial skills. Cameroon. Agriculture. Cameroon. Advancing women's empowerment through environmental protection and sustainable agriculture. Issue. In the northwest province of Cameroon, unsustainable agricultural land use practices are still being used. Such practices include traditional slash and burn, which increases the destruction of natural resources and leads to increased poverty as well as heightened gender inequality. Action. The Ntanka Village Women Common Initiative Group, an organization that focuses on gender empowerment, livelihood improvement, and HIV/AIDS care, implemented the Grassroots Women Environmental Protection and Poverty Alleviation Project, with support from the GEF Small Grants Program and other donors. The project included the delivery of multiple workshops on natural resource management and appropriate farming techniques, and established an environmental documentation center for women's continuous education. Impact. The project has led to the empowerment and training of 190 women in environment-related issues, which has also helped them to increase their income through sustainable agricultural practices such as the reduced use of synthetic fertilizers. Soil erosion has decreased while crop yield has increased. Women have been further empowered through active group participation and the use of democratic practices, and have gained a better understanding of their economic contribution to the household and community. International. The Convention on Biological Diversity, 2015 to 2020 Gender Plan of Action. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, entered into force in 1981. It brings women into the focus of human rights concerns, focusing on the meaning of equality and how it can be achieved. It establishes an international Bill of Rights for women, as well as an agenda for countries to guarantee the enjoyment of such rights. A Guide to the Convention Gender Plan of Action, 2015 to 2020 Gender Plan of Action Pocket Guide, Summary and Examples, is available on this download. For information on decisions and recommendations on gender under the Convention, please see the publication Gender and Biodiversity Technical Guide. How are gender, indigenous peoples and local communities' perspectives addressed in the Convention? Knowledge, innovation and practices. Subject to its national legislation. Respect, preserve and maintain knowledge, innovations and practices of indigenous and local communities, embodying traditional lifestyles relevant for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and promote their wider application with the approval and involvement of the holders of such knowledge, innovations and practices, and encourage the equitable sharing of the benefits arising from the utilization of such knowledge, innovations and practices. Full participation. Recognizing the vital role that women play in the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity, and affirming the need for the full participation of women at all levels of policy making and implementation for the biological diversity conservation. And you, point of reflection. What will you do in your own work? Share your thoughts and ideas and write your reflections. Module summary. Existing gender inequalities lead to biodiversity loss and accelerate the depletion of natural resources. Women and men have different knowledge, needs and priorities related to biodiversity, which must be brought to bear in policies and projects to effectively reverse the loss and unsustainable use of biodiversity. Empowering women to play an active role in biodiversity conservation can create significant sustainable development opportunities and increase the effectiveness of conservation efforts in different sectors, while also advancing gender equality. The importance of taking a gender-responsive approach in biodiversity management has been recognized across a range of global commitments with implications at national and local levels.